I'd like to take a minute at the top of this talk to ask you to think about an opportunity that you have not taken or a goal that you haven't started working on. You have it? So why haven't you started working towards that? Have you been thinking that right now just isn't the right time? And if you have been thinking that, are you thinking that tomorrow or maybe next year will be the time that you're going to get started? Since I can't go around the room and ask all of these people their own answers to this question, I'll give you an example from my life. When I was coming out here to Shanghai, it was arguably a really bad time to be doing it. I had just given birth to my second baby in 3 years, and my husband could not work here in China. The idea of coming out here and being basically a single mom just really didn't appeal to me. But the job, oh my gosh, the job was a chance of a lifetime. I could lead early on in my career. I had a chance to have an influence on one of the most important international relationships in the world. And so we decided that I just could not pass it up. My husband found a job as close as he could get, and my kids, well, I got a lot of help with taking care of my kids. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to make sure that people think about the fact that there is never a perfect time. Generally, when people say something isn't right, that the time isn't right, what they're talking about is that they have barriers. But when you say, oh, the time just isn't right, it makes it a lot easier to ignore those things that you want to do. So, confession time. How many of you have used excuses like, well, you know, I'd love to do that, but I have small kids, or I'd love to do that, but I'm really busy right now, or my mom tells me that this isn't a good time to do this. I know that I have. And so I want to make sure that I tell you some stories today that hopefully will make you go out there and decide that you really want to do these things. And when you face those barriers, I want you to use your courage and your perseverance and your creativity to overcome any barriers you come across. I've come across the stories that I'm going to tell you during a 17-year career as a diplomat. This is me 17 years ago, wearing black and white again. That wasn't actually a plan. And so I have this really great, really cool job. I get to move around the world. I get to see these places that you read about in the news. So I've been to Kabul, and I've been to Baghdad, and I've worked in the White House. And it's really been an amazing experience. And one of the things I do for my job is I go out and I talk about American values and American policies with all sorts of people. So I get to meet students, and I get to meet refugees, and I get to meet business people and government people. And you know what? The most successful people I've ever met all have a story about overcoming a barrier that you could say was imperfect timing. Take motherhood, for example. There are a lot of people who are going to tell you that being a mother means that you can't take whatever opportunity in your life. I want to tell you about somebody who has taken motherhood, who is a single mother, in fact, and who has an incredibly high-powered job. This woman not only managed to figure out how she was going to spend time with her daughter, she also worked out a way to pay it forward to the people who worked for her. So she decided that every Sunday she would not work. She would spend that time with her daughter. And when people came to her concerned about taking jobs in her organization because they thought they wouldn't be able to be there for her kids, she worked out a way to help them not only do the job, but also to spend time with their kids when their kids had important things going on in their lives. I think this last point is very important. You'll notice I didn't say she worked out a way to find work-life balance. There are a lot of things that you will have to sacrifice on the road to goals. But my point today is that I want you to decide what you really want and have the courage to go out and get them. This woman, who, by the way, is Valerie Jarrett, the special advisor to the President of the United States, had the courage to tell the President of the United States, look, I need Sunday off. I need to spend it with my daughter. If she can do that, then I think all of us in this room can find the courage to ask for what we need to make it to our goals. Now, you may be thinking now, well, Gwen, that's all very well and good. Look, you're a mid-career diplomat. Valerie Jarrett is a very powerful woman. But what about me? I don't have power. I'm early on in my career. I want to tell you that this is possible for everybody. I want to tell you a story about a woman I met when I was serving in Alexandria, Egypt. She was an amazing woman. She was a high school student who had great grades, who had great English, and even more important, was a really great person and who gave back to her community through volunteering. This woman made it into Harvard University. It was something that most of her friends couldn't even dream of. And you might think that was where the story ended. But she lived in Alexandria, Egypt, where, frankly, families were not really sure that they wanted to send especially their girls, to the United States because they were afraid they would be morally corrupted there. This was such a trend that many American universities were starting up campuses in Dubai so that parents from the Middle East could send their girls to a place where at least they knew the society had the same values as the parents did. But Harvard doesn't have a campus in Dubai. And this woman knew that she really couldn't afford to wait for attitudes towards going to the United States to change. So she had to change her parents' minds. She had to change the community's minds. And she managed to do that. And she went to Harvard. Again, you might think that was the end of the story. But when she got to Boston, just as her parents had predicted, she was miserable. She ran into a lot of women who were dressed sort of like me. And in the Middle East, if you're dressed like this would be like wearing my bikini up on stage, which, thankfully for all of us, I chose not to do. She also had trouble because she had all of these brilliant classmates who were talking about topics she had never heard of before because she had lived a very, very sheltered life up until then. And probably the worst part was that it was difficult for her to find things to eat because she was Muslim and she needed to find halal food. But she persevered. She made her way to the second term. She found friends who helped her navigate her way through this experience. And in the end, she graduated with honors from Harvard. Now, I don't know what she's going to do with her life because her graduation is pretty recent, but I know she's going to go out there and she's going to bring people together because that's the sort of person she is. And when I have a time when I think I've run into a terrible day or a terrible month or a terrible year, I think about her and I realize that I can persevere and get through this difficult period. There are women in the world who you could argue their entire lives are a difficult period. Take, for instance, the women I worked with in Afghanistan. These women were refugees, so not only were they dealing with the fact that their society saw them as second-class citizens, they were also very poor, and they were returning back to a country that they hadn't lived in for years, sometimes even decades. Against this backdrop, we started offering programs for women to teach them how to make a little bit of money so that they could raise their status in the household. In addition, we also taught them other skills. Now, these women could have stayed home. They could have continued to walk 2 kilometers to get dirty water and let their husbands speak for them and spent their lives living the status quo, but they didn't. They came to these programs. And some of them found making a little bit of money was enough. And some of them were very excited about the other things we were teaching. Bear in mind that Afghanistan is one of those places where 1 in 10 children will die before the age of 10 of diseases that are preventable by very simple methods. One of the things we did in one of our programs was to teach women how to strain and boil water. One of the women went home to tell her husband very excitedly about what she'd learned that day. And her husband said, What are you talking about? You're listening to these foreigners, you're wasting your time. What are you doing? And so this woman could have decided, okay, well, my husband doesn't want me to do this. But she didn't want to wait until one of her kids got sick to tell him, see, I told you so. She wanted to change their lives right then. So what she did was she went down to the river, and she got a glass of the water there. It looked kind of like this. It was brown, it had things floating in it, and she presented her husband with a glass with the river water and a glass with treated water. And she asked him, which of these would you like to drink? She told me from that day forward, he never again criticized her for doing the straining and the boiling. And as a result, her family's life got better and her family's health got better. Now, I think this kind of creative framing of a problem is something we could probably all learn something from. But it is one of those things that is also very, very extreme. I understand that most of us in this room do not have to walk many hours to get water, and we don't get dirty water when we go there. But I bring up the point because I want us to remember, when we face our incredibly complicated lives, that there is always somebody out there in more dire straits doing something amazing, overcoming barriers with creativity like this woman did. What I want you to come away from today with is that I want you to think about what you thought about at the beginning of this. I want you to stop waiting on the perfect someday to go out and achieve your goals or to take an opportunity. I want you to look at the barriers that you face and use your creativity and your courage and your perseverance to overcome those barriers. I want you to think about these women and go and chase after your dreams, because I believe if we all start to overcome the barriers around time, that we can go out and change the world. Thank you.